So this part 7, is a little bit unusual because I did the painting without recording any sound. I obviously just didn't feel like chatting while I was painting at this point. But this is quite an interesting section. I think this is when people in the past have asked me for tutorials or walkthroughs. I think what's in this video is possibly the stuff they're looking to see, because I've got my underpainting. I've done a sort of basic pass of paint, but here's where I really start to work the detail a little bit more. So you can see here I'm painting away at these fence posts. I'm kind of using what's underneath. You know, it's quite a classical technique, I guess. It kind of pains me to say that. I don't know why. But to paint with opaque paint over a washy underpainting is quite a is it Venetian or Florentine? That I always forget which one's which in the history of painting. But hey, so I'm using opaque paint, a much smaller brush. I'm letting the underpainting show through as my darks. And what's great about that, there's some mid-tone areas as well with the underpainting. What's great is all that modulated, varied colour is showing through as my darks and my darker mid-tones, and the highlights are quite flat. Not entirely flat colour. You can see there is, because of the way Art Rage works so well, it's mixing the colour as it's laid on with what's underneath, and there are controls to adjust how much that happens with the thinners and the pressure on the brush. But look, I'm doing a little bit of blending in there. I'm constantly colour picking as I go. I sort of ride the keyboard, if you like, and constantly colour pick from the underlying colours and the colours that I put down, the more highlight colours. And you can see just start to build up form in this way. I'll just watch and see if anything exciting happens that I can talk about. Something I do a lot of, and this is a technique I picked up at a very youthful stage from good old Simon Bisley, was the first time I saw this, is creating your foreground shapes by cutting in with the background. So I'm tightening up the edges of these fence posts by painting in that beigey background colour. Okay, so we've skipped forward a little bit here. I'm working on this cave entrance and the surrounding grassy area. It's quite funny, when I was speaking in, I think, one of the earlier parts, I was saying I was quite happy, and I was reminding myself that there was a lot of work still to do and so on. Oh hey, that could be a later part. See, this is the trouble with recording this out of order. It's all timey-wimey, spacey-wacy stuff now. We're all at sea now. Anyway, let's forget what I was just going to say there. This is exciting. This is improvised voiceover. Just watch the painting and see what's going on. So much the same technique. I'm using lighter colours to lay in highlights over my underpainting. And I'm also putting in some darks. I never used to do that. I always used to try and work dark to light. But like so many things over the years, you kind of realise a sort of personal rule of something you do gets you so far, and I think it's worth having those little disciplines. And it gets you so far, and there comes a point where it's time to leave it behind. It's the old saying, is it Bruce Lee? Or did I make this up having read a lot of Bruce Lee? About, you know, the ferry gets you across the river, but you don't carry it on your back up the mountain. Something like that. So, you know, these little rules. When I left college, I painted for, it would be 3 years with just, and this is using traditional media, with just 3 primaries and white. That's all I painted with for years, because I'd been told this was a good plan. It was the best way to do it. Mixing all my colours. I didn't use any tubed colours at all. That's a real kind of impressionist technique. And whilst as soon as I started working commercially, I realised I had to drop this. There are certain times where you need certain colours from a tube. But I think the discipline of working in that way was no bad thing at all, and it taught me a lot about colour. But eventually you drop these rules. So yeah, I work in opaque media in light and dark colours. Sometimes the underpainting makes the mid-tone between those two, sometimes it's the dark areas. I'm just kind of flexible depending on what's lying underneath. I'll try to be anyway. I always feel a bit self-conscious talking about the way I make work because I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of super genius. I'm very much still a student of painting, always will be, and I'm quite happy with some of my results, but certainly not happy all the time. And I'm certainly not showing my process here as telling anybody how they should do it. I'm just kind of reporting some things that I've learned. Here I am, look, I've zoomed right out. This is quite interesting. I've zoomed out and I'm just working at a zoomed out resolution just to kind of look at you. It's good to look at the big picture while you're painting as well and not get too drawn into tiny details. I'll let myself every now and then zoom in and draw like those gate posts, have a bit of fun putting those in. But you've always got to have an eye on the bigger picture and making sure the whole thing is coming along at a reasonable rate. In the method I use anyway. I know some people like to just work a tiny piece at a time and finish it and move on to the next piece. I've always been a kind of all over the canvas kind of painter. Bring it all along to a kind of similar degree. Oh look, I put some dark in there and I'm just working it back in. Again, something great that Art Rage does, I tend to find better than Painter or Photoshop, is you can put down a nice little splodge of dark like you would with traditional oil paint, a nice rich deep colour, and then just work it into the surrounding paint. So it's never going to come out quite as dark. The intention is not to come out as dark as you put it on, but it's to deepen and darken down the colours around it. Still working away at these rocks all around. I must confess I do love the kind of landscape stuff. It's quite abstract, and I trained as an abstract painter, and I still enjoy just putting paint down. And there we go, coming to the end of this section, painting away there. So it's really just quite a almost mechanical pass. Mechanical is the wrong word. It's quite a methodical pass of mid-tones and lights and darks.